I really like some of the pieces around the small things we do every day really have a big impact. And, with all districts across the country, you guys have to make sudden change all of a sudden. And I'm curious, what are some of the small habits that you guys had that allowed for you to maintain the connection and the collaboration that you have today in this kind of remote work environment?
The work we've been doing with our instructional coaches, we had created the habit of doing a check-in prior to um, developing our agenda for our monthly collaborative with them. Really what we were hoping to do is create some more meaning around the work we were doing and shift from being informational to learning together. So one of the habits we had was working through creating an agenda that is based on um, really the authentic feedback they were asking for and how they wanted to spend time together when we collaborated. And so something what we've learned is we don't necessarily have to be together to meet. And when we meet, how are we using our time? And so we were all thinking about that because I had shared some of the work. I had shared really the Spark model
Mhm.
and how that could be implemented in our setting to create a scenario where we're really focused on learning together.
That's interesting. And I think the Spark model, you're talking about CPAD, right? The Spark,
Yeah, yeah,
Expand,
yeah.
Practice. And one of the things I'm curious about is as a leader in an organization, how do you think about like the tension between getting project work done versus learning as a team? And what have you found to be a reasonable proportion or percentage to have around those two areas, right? Because I think a lot of leaders struggle with that.
Yes, we do. I think it's being number one is identifying that. I would say, I mean, our goal is to split that. So there is always going to be the time you have to spend on things you have to work through together, problems to solve. But I think there should be some cognizance around time needed to learn together too, because it's in those moments that you develop the collaborative nature of your group. It's in those moments that you can rely on the next problem to solve because you've now identified strengths and weaknesses of your group and who's someone that can run out ahead of that problem because now we really know how we work together.
I love that because one of the things that I often talk to teams about is, in sports, like teams practice working together all the time before game time.
Yeah.
And sometimes in our work environments, we kind of consider everything to be game time and we don't get a chance to practice. And I love the fact that you're actually making the time to practice because I think the hardest thing about teams is, can you rely on the person next to you to be in the position that you expect them to be? And if you don't practice that, it's really hard to have that predictability. How do you convince a team to try something new, something like this? And you went to some institute and you were like,
Yeah.
hey, I heard of this thing called CPAD. We're going to start doing it. And they're probably like, what are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Well, I was strategic in that. I've learned the hard way on how you get people kind of bought into some things. It normally doesn't work like, hey, I learned this and I want you to learn this too. It's more discovery. And so I said, here's something I shared in a meeting prior to the delivery of this in a more formal way. Here's something I've learned. We kind of had this process of what have you been working on? So I kind of planted a seed and I had some of them saying, I want to know more about that resource, that habit resource. I put them on to Atomic Habits as a book to read if they're interested. So a couple other things that we had been talking about. And so I think that just the seed planting primed them for the next scenario, which was, this might be something we're really interested in.
Getting people to commit on habits versus holding people accountable for goals. And I
Mhm.
just love to hear how you made that shift, whether your colleagues feel comfortable with that shift, and now that you've been doing it for a while, what's been the overall reaction?
We had a lot of conversation about weight loss, and that's the perfect example. Is I set a goal for weight loss, but I never achieve it. Instead of I set a habit, and maybe I begin to see results over time. So the direct correlation for that is it was coming up at a time too where we were identifying goals for the year on how our principals would be evaluated. And so talked with the superintendent. We discussed that habit piece. He was excited about that being a potential shift. So we framed the language when we started talking with our principals to habits instead of goals,
Mm-hmm.
and went so far as to say, so what's habit number one? Just not even saying the word goal. Now we're still working through that. I mean, that's probably a challenge to shift our language away from that. But I think the mindset work is there, and now it's beginning to be a part of who we are.
What's the one skill you think will be essential for you guys to be able to navigate the work ahead of you, not knowing that it's uncharted territory right now?
Use a process to work through problems. I think one of the things that we saw pretty quickly, now I'm talking about cabinet, when we were faced with this, probably like a lot of other people, things were happening fast. We were spending a lot of time together talking about things, but probably a lot of wheel spinning too. So we started thinking about, so how do we structure our time so we can get some things accomplished? And then making sure that everybody had a piece of that pie moving forward. I've seen such growth in our group since we began this, and now it's pretty seamless. Where we say, okay, I'm owning that one. That's me. I'm doing this. I'll report back to the group, or I need help with this. Who can help me with this? So I think that's going to be necessary moving forward. I think we're going to have to continue to get better at working in that way.
That's perfect.